मेरा मेरा उधर है। 1920 है। 1920 है। 100 बहुत छोटा हो जाएगा, टेक्स्ट नहीं दिखे। बोल दो। मॅम का पासवर्ड ते नाही माहीत. नो आयडिया. तर काढून लावू का? त्यांचं पासवर्ड बंद, स्क्रीन सेव्हरनी बंद झालं ना. काय करणार मग? चालू आहे ना पासवर्ड. मॅम का पासवर्ड. Good morning and namaste, myself, K.H. Rahul. A warm welcome to all Triple ID members, teachers and students from Team Triple ID PRC. I request everyone, a formal request to keep your ringing devices on silent mode. And I request our chairperson, Mr. Ajay Panchmatia sir and Rajesh Puranik sir, to come ahead on stage and felicitate Bharat Ratna Shri Mahashri Karve sir. Thank you, Ajay sir. Thank you, Rajesh sir. Here we have formally started our presentation today, and I request all of you to rise for our national anthem.
जनगण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता। पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा, विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा। तव शुभ नामे जागे, तव शुभ आशीष मांगे, गाहे तव जय गाथा। जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता। जय हे जय हे जय हे
Thank you. Today we have two special events today. Where there is a woman, there is a magic. And wish you all, pretty women out here, happy Women's Day. I heard some thank yous. So, we'll start with a nice video. Even I know we all are waiting eagerly what exactly the video means to. Ma'am will reveal soon. Let's begin with the program for which we are eagerly waiting for. It's my honor to introduce a visionary who has shaped Indian design for over 30 years, none other than Bnca Patel, founder and chairperson of SCP Interior Design Private Limited and a driving force behind Statement Interiors. With over 300 projects across residence, offices, hospitality, and institutional spaces. Her work seamlessly blend architectural form with interior elegance, balancing global standards with Indian cultural sustainability. Her landmark contribution include Alliance Friends Building, Raj Bhavan, Swarnam Sankul, and her pivotal role as an interior sub-consultant for Central Vista project, a symbol of India's evolving identity. She has also enriched Ahmedabad's urban fabric through metro station facelifts and public art initiative. An advocate for meaningful design, she shared her insight in her own book named Meaning is More, Interior Design for India. Recognized by Forbes India, the Bold Club, and celebrated as the Doyen of Design, and she continues to inspire the industry. Today, she'll be presenting Beyond the Facade Interiors of Central Vista project, offering an inside look at a vision, intricate detailing, and design philosophy behind one of the India's most significant and talked about project. So, all young minds, put your hands together and welcome incomparable none other than Bnca Patel. Play your presentation. What do you mean?
Good morning, everyone. It's a very special pleasure to be in Pune. I say this because I've presented many times, many places, many different countries. But Pune is one city where I've presented the maximum number of times. And I've always been welcomed with warm hearts, warm people, and This presentation, which I bring to you today, it makes it even more special because it's the first time in the country that I'm presenting to anybody my work that we have done over the last 5 years. So we will look at what I have brought. The thank you goes to IIID Pune chapter because they made this educational event happen. Typically such things would happen for the professionals, and I felt that if we can take it to schools, faculty, students, it would be wonderful. And they supported my idea, and I really thank them for being able to do so. What I'm going to show you today is a glimpse of Central Vista redevelopment project. The work that our office has been doing. You have probably seen bits and pieces of the project on the net, but mostly it would be master plans or architectural facades. Today I'm here to present what is beyond the facade. Interior design for Central Vista redevelopment project. Because you'll always see, whether it is on 26 Jan or whenever, but it'll always be pictures from outside. And today we'll see what was done inside. So I have a question first to the audience. Most of us sitting here today are designers into education, studying education, in the field of design or practicing, etc. Can we leave a cultural impact? We can. And I think to sort of take that onus as a designer as we go along in the present India is very important. Because it is one of the countries where maximum number of infrastructure development will happen in the next 20 years. And we will play a very important role. This project is a momentous project. It is a convergence of history, vision, and functionality. You must be a little familiar. Are you familiar with the project, or should I describe it more? Especially to the students I'm asking. Describe? Okay. So what you see is an overview of Central Vista area. On your extreme left is the Rashtrapati Bhavan, as it's titled. And then you have the whole Kartavya path, and the extreme right is the India Gate. This vision was taken upon that this area, which is all the facilities that are required for running a country like ours, needs to be revamped. They need to be provided more. So there was a study done before this project began. The study was done to look at how many ministries we have and where are they housed. So we have 52 ministries in our country. And at the moment they are housed all over Delhi in different buildings. Only some of the ministries sit on the either side of Kartavya path. The other thing they found out is at least the Parliament building was not a building designed to be a Parliament house. It was designed to be a council house by the British Raj. We repurposed it to make it a Parliament building for all these years. When you look at the ministries like PMO and you look at Finance Ministry, they sit in the north and the south block, which are two buildings which are on either side of Rashtrapati Bhavan. Again, it's repurposed. And then as you go down, you have some buildings on either side. Land use was not at its best. Facilities definitely not appropriate to work in present time. So this project was a big project, which was in 2020 it began. It's still ongoing, it's not completed. Some parts, some packages are through. So this itself makes it a big project. The size, just the sheer size of it It is about 20,000 crores worth project. So this project was awarded to HCP DPM, and Bimal Patel is the architect who was the main person who was assigned the job. He appointed more than 57 different consultants to be on the project, and we were the interior consultant on that project. A project like this can happen only in collaboration. It is not one person's job. It is not one consultant's job. Even when I say interior designer, there was no way I could have functioned with the support of all the various other consultants on board. So I am honored that I am here to present it, but in a way, it was possible with the support of many, many different people on it. So that's just generally a feel for you how prestigious the project was and what a task it was. As a project, it was more than a project. It was a lifetime opportunity, as well as responsibility that we needed to fulfill as designers. Creating something that was to set benchmarks in its own. Being a project of eminent stature, national significance, and bringing a cultural impact for decades to come. Whenever I'm at such gatherings and I meet people, they always ask, what did it feel like working on such a large project? And so today's presentation, I'm going to begin with just that, to share with you what it meant to start this project. It meant rediscovering our roots. Monuments, textiles, scriptures, ideologies, publications, everything and anything that captures the rich history of our country. In visuals, text, or sometimes both. For instance, you see the Constitution book, which is on the far left. Constitution of India is a very important document, and basis of which the largest democracy in this world is being run. While it was being drafted, Sri Nandalal Bose and his students from Shanti Niketan created the exquisite illustrations for the manuscript. We decided to take inspiration from this visual. And we said, can we use it as part of the overall design when we take it forward on the project and various packages? It also meant inspiring beyond the conventional idea of government spaces. There is an image that comes up in our mind whenever we hear of government offices. Those are few images of the Parliament building and other work environments, overflowing with files, lacking amenities, wires hanging all over, new additions seen in every corner, giving a very unorganized look. And we just simply said, can we challenge this conventional idea through this project? We also decided to look at global standards. These are assemblies and parliament houses of various different countries all over the world. We looked at spaces and elements. And this exercise was followed for many of the other eminent projects in the world. Today, our country is not second to anyone in the world. When it comes to the aspirations and dreams of its people, as designers, it's our responsibility to give them infrastructure that lets their aspirations and dreams take a flight. So it was almost like saying that India has reached somewhere, its own standards need to be shown globally. It meant creating something that is stately, but not ostentatious. See, we have from the history many examples of palaces, monuments. But is that appropriate for government? These are state houses. Whether if it's a home, then it's a state home. If it's a work environment, it's a state work environment. It's not a corporate office. So how do you define a language for this? And so that was one of the biggest challenge, to say that we are designing spaces that will be representation of India's rich history, but also of its ideals, its democracy, and its people. So working on this project meant making an effort, an extra effort in everything we did. Be it research part of it, or be it understanding the use of spaces. While working on the project, our teams actually dedicated shadowing exercises, which is physically going, following people through their daily routines in Delhi, and looking at how they work in their spaces and fully understand that requirements. We actually did that in quite a few buildings, because you cannot make assumptions. Their kind of work, the way they collaborate, their hierarchy, how things work, how they arrive, how they leave is so different. And to understand that is very important. One couldn't be just sitting in Ahmedabad in an office thinking of things that you want to do. So we wanted to make sure that the vision turns into reality. So HCPID, which is our firm, contributed towards the interiors of 5 projects within the Central Vista Common Central Secretariat building. So first one is Common Central Secretariat buildings. There are 10 of those. The Executive Enclave, that's where the main offices of the highest authority would be. The Executive Enclave Phase 2, residential requirements of highest authorities. The Vice President's Enclave, and last but not the least, the new Parliament building. Working as interior sub-consultants for HCP, it was not a fine line on what we contributed, on and where they chipped in. As interior designers, we often had a few ideas for architecture of the spaces, and similarly, HCP, the architecture firm, had their own vision of how a space should look when it comes to interiors. So the work that I'm about to show is a shared effort of HCPID and HCP, along with efforts from more than 57 other sub-consultants. At the risk of repeating myself, before I dwell into design part, for all of us working on this project, it was more than just designing spaces. It was a shared purpose with every hour, every decision, and every effort poured into this project carried a deep sense of pride, knowing we were building something meaningful for our nation. This presentation is essentially in 4 parts: the concepts, design, communication, and review. So foundation of any design project and its concept is the beginning. That is what lays the strong concept and serves as the guiding force, shaping every design decision that follows. But when working on a project of such significance and magnitude as Central Vista, what do you fall back on? Where do you draw your inspirations from? For us, the answer was simple: India. Not just its present, but its past, something that has withstood the test of time, evolved, and yet remains relevant today. One such inspiration is yoga. Today, yoga is practiced globally, but its roots trace back to 5,000 years to India. More than just physical postures, yoga is a spiritual practice, a way of life. It embodies balance, harmony, and alignment, core principles that extend beyond the body into the spaces we design. One of the key elements of yoga is alignment of chakras, energy centers within the body that influence physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. We took this concept and transformed it into something tangible, a motif. The motif derived from the chakra became a defining element for spaces. With the Vice President's Enclave, it was not just an aesthetic choice, but a way to embed deeper meaning into design, aligning the physical space with an ancient philosophy that still holds relevance to today. Just as yoga inspired the Vice President's Enclave, each building with central vista was rooted in a unique concept, drawn from India's rich cultural and historical fabric. Ayurveda became the foundation for Executive Enclave Phase 2, integrating the principles of natural balance and holistic well-being. Ananta, representing infinity and continuity, shaped the Executive Enclave, reinforcing the idea of an enduring administrative framework. Rashtriya Chinha, the lotus, peacock, and banyan tree, inspired and gave identity to the new Parliament building, symbolizing the essence of democracy and governance. And finally, Vyavasthit. Vyavasthit, meaning systematic and well-ordered, became the guiding principle for Common Central Secretariat, reflecting efficiency, structure, and organization in administration. These concepts were not mere thematic elements. They became the soul of each space. They provided a distinct identity while creating a bigger association. So I would like to begin with sharing something that I strongly believe in. What is it that gives the power of a space? I have always believed that it's measured in the memory of our soul. It is the experience which is far more important, rather than the gaze that flattens the picture in one's mind. You may have hundreds and hundreds of pictures, but if you don't have an experience of that space, you're not going to be able to tell whether that space is powerful or not powerful. And I've strongly believed in this, and it's with these thoughts, most of the spaces that we rendered on this project, they carried that weight and that challenge. As I've explained to you, it had several packages, several types of spaces, starting from new Parliament building to homes, to offices, to ministers' offices, etc. To give a presentation just in an hour and help you understand it, I felt that this is one way to try and look at interiors. When we think of interiors, we think of it as surfaces first, which could be the flooring, the walls, the ceiling. Then there is the feature elements, which kind of highlight a project. Then you have lighting, because you need to incorporate it in the space. And then you have smaller elements like furniture, and finally the styling. And as these 5 elements come together, it provides a completeness of an interior project. Why is challenging to do a project of this scale? You're dealing with volumes which are really big, spaces which are very big. In a simple language, I would say, how do you fill it up? What do you fill it up with? I mean, it'll require the same old number of sofas or that same one dining room or something, but you need to make the spaces feel complete, and you cannot make them as small as they would be in an apartment. So, how were surfaces dealt with? A few examples. Wall treatments. We use 3 major elements, obvious ones: paint, wallpaper, and fabric. I'll show you examples of it as we go along. When it came to creating a color story for each package, we looked at miniature paintings. We looked at miniature paintings not for its subject matter, but for its color story, for its borders. We tried to pixelate them and create a color palette out of it. And then just using, say, one painting, we would create a color palette for, say, a whole residence, which would mean about 25 to 26 different spaces in the house. So that was one way of harmonizing it, and yet keeping one color as the accent and the rest following as a palette. This is just one example to show how the color story was set up. Like I said, too many projects, but the same method was used in various projects. We used wall color, framed it with moldings, connected it with the rest of the color palette. Similarly, for work environments, define alcoves, define certain walls which created the backdrop. When you're doing projects of this kind, backdrop is a big deal. Who's going to sit and what are you going to see behind that person? Or even when it came to slightly smaller spaces. Historically, when we look at it, we are quite used to the idea of a lot of patterns. I mean, even if we look at all of us here today, all of us are very comfortable with patterns even when it comes to clothing. And even environments used to have that. And the idea was to celebrate that and make it part of the new environments that you design. So that's an example of using wallpapers with patterns and prints in a fairly modern setting. Or framing a view, making a backdrop to certain artwork. When you do large spaces, one of the biggest issue is acoustics. There's a certain percentage of area that you need to provide for acoustic requirement. And so creating such fabric wall panels, in a way, if you look at it, one is going back to the old Indian ways of doing quilting. Recycling, repurposing fabric and turning into quilts was so much part of our history. And in this project, we brought it back through the wall panels as we did them. In more serene situation, creating just an embossed pattern. So that's helped us look at wall surfaces. The next is flooring. Flooring defines how you move into a space and how a space feels. There are many examples of the past. That is from Rashtrapati Bhavan. Our idea was to look at that there was a need for it, but we were not going to depend on influences from the colonial times. We will look at more what is our own. A rangoli is a very common thing that we still continue doing. In fact, in Maharashtra, it's very beautiful with that white color, that the way patterns are done, and we still do them. Those shapes, those forms, those colors, that fluidity, can we bring it back? And it's very easy when you look back in that manner. For a project of this importance, from sustainable point of view, we chose to use only Indian stones, locally sourced and easy to supply. As a package, flooring package as I would put it, patterns. It was broken into 3 parts: borders, motifs and galichas. Galichas means carpets. I'll explain it as we go along. Some sketches that look at how borders are done. You need formal borders, you need semi-formal ones, and then you need certain which is geometry and with fluidity. And combining this was necessary as you defined various spaces. Then you had the motif. The role of a motif is to establish a junction or a pause or define a space, and to come up with patterns that worked for different situations, different packages, etc. Then comes the galichas. Galichas are in a way replacement to rug. You sometimes can't have rugs and carpets in a country which is full of heat and dust, where there is a lot of movement, where there is a transition from the home to the garden. And how can you use flooring pattern to achieve this? Because otherwise, say you had a reception area with excessive movement, you put a rug and it would become like a foot mat. So galicha was one way to deal with that kind of requirement on various spaces that we did. It could become lift lobbies, it could be reception areas, or it was also verandas as you transition from one space into the garden. Then we come to the ceiling. Again, an important feature when you design an overall space, because ceiling kind of enhances the volumes. And it's not as if we don't have examples from the past. India has had such a rich past. Beautiful ceilings were done. But again, this was not appropriate for this type of project. But taking influence from there, we said, can we embellish the cornices? So the cornices are embellished, taking inspiration from the borders that you see around a miniature painting, the colors and the patterns and the stripes. And can we kind of see that in a 3D form in a cornice? And can that become the way to deal with the ceiling? Can you look at craft form, the cutwork, and can that become painted in a ceiling? Or have decorative rosettes in arrival lounges, porches. So from surfaces, we are moving on to the next one, which is feature elements. What are feature elements? They are the striking elements that give an identity to a space. And the first striking element would be the main door. And it shows some examples of what main doors and how they were worked upon. The idea was to still stick to the concept, the motif, and try and see through different materials, techniques, how it gets incorporated into the project. The scale changes. or it could be frieze panels above a door. When rendered in a space, that's what it would look like. It's multiple elements as they come together. At other times, it could be a jali. Again, inspired from yoga or from Ayurveda. Material could be stainless steel with PVD coating, or it could be CNC cut MDF painted with PU paint to give you results that hold a space together. Then comes the lighting package. There is generic lights that you get, tube lights and spotlights and track lights and etc. But when it comes to decorative lights, they could be ceiling hung, they could be wall hung. I must say that that aspect in Indian industry has not yet evolved as much. And then when you're talking about spaces with this kind of volume, it had to be something that had to be bespoke, designed and manufactured for the project. To add to it, there was a different challenge. We have seen chandeliers in large projects, but chandeliers are ostentatious, not appropriate. So we actually designed stately light fixtures. Fixtures which were simple to maintain, which were robust, more affordable. Glass was local from India so that it can be replaced after even 20 years. And it was a range of light fixtures that could be used within the space itself. So some sketches and some photographs expressing how these fixtures were looked at. Each aspect was a challenge. It's not as if one had done this in life before. I have worked 35 years, but each time we handled a new thing, it was a new thing to learn about. But what we did discover is India has fantastic number of people who can bring things together once they are told what you want. So through aggregators, you would find people who will manufacture it. So this gentleman who manufactured it was from Mumbai, and he brought samples and brought things over, and we could see it, and actually it could come together. That's when you realize that anything is possible. If you want to do it, if you want to make that extra effort, it is possible. And then the fixtures also reflected the concept. So these were the fixtures for Ananta, the infinity, and little more decorative, simpler ones for the work environment. For multi-purpose hall, it would become slightly more ornate. The biggest package for our firm was furniture. What we discovered is even a simple thing is not available in this country. You cannot have database of total number of furniture companies in this country, their owner, their number, the typology of furniture they do, the turnover of that company, and for how many years they've been functioning. There is no information. So that was the first thing we did. We have an Excel sheet now in our office. Because we were dealing with government. And for government, it was very important that from right to information, it was clearly known how companies were being reviewed. So that was one of the biggest challenge to understand the industry. The other challenge was history of furniture. I say this and I repeat it over and over again. There are only 3 or 4 books in this country which talk about furniture from India. And I think all those 3 books or 4 books are from SEPT archives. And they're now taking it up each state, picking up the vernacular furniture and putting it together. So that was our only source of understanding the vernacular furniture in this country. Some are better done out of those 4 books and some are not well done. But we had decided that we will do furniture pieces that are embedded in history. So we looked at a bajot, a charpai, patterns from Constitution, and tried to see how we can bring it into our furniture. What was very clear was we were not going to reproduce just as by copying any of those furniture pieces. We were going to understand the vernacular furniture. Say, for example, a damaccio. It's a traditional furniture. In modern times, we don't need a damaccio. I don't know if anybody knows what a damaccio is. Does anybody know? So damaccio is like a furniture piece. You put it in a house and you pile up your mattresses on it. None of us live like that anymore. But it's a traditional furniture piece which comes from Kutch. So the idea was to look at such furniture, the geometry in it, the structure of it, and to see the beauty of it, its proportions, and try and see what we could learn from it for modern spaces. So similarly, we looked at chakki. I'm sure you know what a chakki is. A bajot and a bakdo. Bakdo is a bench. Bajot, I think it goes across many states. I think Maharashtra also has bajots. So now what do? Now you know you have this from the past. Just going to give you a few examples. You look at it, you stare at it, you sketch it, you try and find a modern version of it which can become a center table. You look at a chakki, its construction, and see if it can create a beautiful side table. Old bakdas with ceramic tiles in it. We can still continue having ceramic tiles in our furniture. Then came the story of legs. Don't smile, okay, when I say legs. The charpai leg. Leg is an important element in a furniture piece. But when we look at all the furniture, when I say all, I mean a lot of Delhi furniture. Because we've walked through Hyderabad House, Rashtrapati Bhavan, PMOs, etc., Parliament, etc. And they all have colonial furniture. And it's all colonial furniture with cabriole legs, or it would have the Louis XV leg, or it would have a Chippendale leg, it'll have a Sheraton leg. But these are all Pardeshi legs. And so we questioned that. One would say, why did you have to do it? But we did it because we wanted to do it. We felt we wanted to do it. So we said we'll look at our kind, cross the colonial influence, and look at all the variations of a charpai leg. We have a history. We have a lot with us. And then studying the proportions, the turning, how they kind of come together, how the joinery happens, how the shape changes where the joinery is. We designed for each package a collection of legs of different heights that would work for different furniture pieces. I'm showing a minuscule amount of stuff that we may have done. But in this 1 hour, there is only that much that I can share with you guys. And then when you take those range and you apply it to furniture pieces, creating side tables, consoles, tie members. Then came, how do you think through some of the, you see, we all like patterns. And as Indians, we love it. Unfortunately, you walk into Tommy Hilfiger or you walk into Marks and Spencer. Marks and Spencer still honors it, but they will kind of try and sell you all these plain colors. But inherently, we all love it. Look at our history of our textiles, saris, textile artwork. There's a huge amount to it. But for this project, we felt the Constitution book was a great source. We had a digital copy of it. We studied every page. We picked out some of the best borders that could then be used with different craft. It could be carved, it could be inlaid. It could be inlaid in engineered stone. So it was used in many different ways. This is a 13 to 14 feet long table and a drawing to show how the inlay was designed for it. Huge conference tables made in 3 parts, how the inlay was thought through. And you couldn't use it directly. You literally had to work out a way to reuse it, repurpose it for the new use. Now this is one thing we couldn't change, which is the use of a wing chair. So do you know what wing chairs were like, or what were they meant for historically? It's actually a British chair, and wing chairs were kept in the library room. And the idea of wing on the sides was to stop the northerly wind draft to come and hit your face. It was meant for England, for them. But जैसे कई चीजें नहीं जाती है, you know, we are kind of there and with it. So as much as we wanted to make a difference, there was a very clear order. High authorities will sit only on a wing chair. But what we did do is, if we are going to reproduce a wing chair, can we do it with a different identity? Can we redefine it? Just notice the front legs. The front legs are an influence from the bajot. These kind of legs, you don't see it in any European furniture. That little inlay that you see on the top, at the head, that comes from our Constitution. And the whole chair from behind, usually wing chairs, when you look at them from behind, they are the ugliest creatures to look at. And we made it a point that we will design a chair which all-rounded looks beautiful. Lectern. Somehow we think that lectern to chalta hai. It is just a base. Like I kept saying, please give me lectern so that I'm seen better. This height is for a Norwegian guy. So when it came to lecterns, we looked at, again, lots of countries. What kind of lecterns various countries use. Most of them had a very generic look. The only country which has a very good lectern, for obviously their government purposes, is Japan. Each speaks Japanese design. And that was our source of inspiration. We said we will do lectern which will speak India. And you took it upon ourselves to develop a lectern with the kind of ornamentation that we've done. So essentially, when you do furniture package, you're dealing with hierarchies, the variations and different pieces that you're doing in various projects in Central Vista, and standardizing the elements. Just doing one desk is not enough, But in reference of sequences, you have to think of how that same person would sit in parliament versus in the minister's office versus in the PMO. How would the KEPSEC PM minister be different from the minister in CCS? So it was, I must say that I never used to like civics subject when I was a student, but while doing this whole project, to understand the whole system of how governments work became something that we took deep interest in and understand all the various levels in it. And to further help us, we had standardization charts within the office of heights, sizes, how things worked, arm heights, so that we could keep a track on everything that we were doing. And then yet create the variation that was necessary. For tables, either we did marquetry in veneer or we used engineered stone and CNC inlay cutting. We couldn't do a Maharaja palang. We had to find what's a stately palang and to create forms which were slightly understated and yet had the grandness. When it came to chairs, thinking through all the variations, revolving with arms, without arms, second level chairs, first level chairs, etc. When we looked at dining tables, seeing how service will be done, these are huge dining tables. You're talking about 20 people, 25 people sitting at it. And then ensuring that various samples were done to check the level of carving, the depth, whether it worked, the forms, the void, the solids. Just to give you a feel, it meant doing this kind of variation. 71 desks, 23 different kinds of conference tables, 103 versions of center tables. And this is what the overall package looked like. Unique designs, 1200. More than 100K number of furniture pieces. And then for each package, the number of pieces versus the unique pieces. So when it's a large project, this is what becomes the, at least for in this case, furniture became the biggest task. Now we're coming to the fifth one, styling. For us, styling is an art of visual storytelling. What does styling mean? It's not an afterthought. It's not just a finishing touch, but it's a key element that enhances the overall experience of the space. And it would have elements like rugs and carpets, soft furnishings, framed art, and accessories. A subject, in fact, I would say, I know there are a lot of faculty here, but a subject which often is never taught in interior design schools. So just to give you an example, both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha together was 35,000 square feet carpet. One was developed based on peacock and the other one was developed based on lotus. We worked with a vendor to develop the pattern. You will find it interesting, and we did as well, that peacock as a form, the whole peacock shape, peacock as a bird, is often used in patterns and textiles and borders and things, or even stone carving. But the feather itself as a motif has not evolved as much even historically. So we had to work fairly hard to turn a peacock into something geometric that can be used in a carpet. It's a radial space. To think of a carpet as it will move through the radial form, how the center will be marked strongly, as it goes further out it recedes. The public galleries had blue carpets, and the lower parliament area, the Lok Sabha, had green. It's taking lotus. A lot of sampling was done. A lot of iterations were done. There is a software called Galija, which carpet makers would use. So once they've designed it on CAD, they would throw it into Galija and give you the carpet look. So we learned ourselves a lot about carpets, hand-knotted carpets, hand-tufted ones, how to work with vendors, how to create things that were closer to what we needed. The tenders had very well-defined rug requirements. Knots were given, hand-tufted requirements were given, wool typology was given, even the adhesive that is required to stick carpets was given. So those were for Parliament, but other places also required rugs, which were not wall-to-wall, but they were of humongous size. But the first job was to try and understand the doors. It was New York Metropolitan Museum published this book called Flowers Underfoot. And that gives you a collection of carpets to show that those are the Indian carpets. And it had examples from Japan, Pakistan, few from Jaipur, to show that these were more indigenously Indian ones. And we use that as a reference because we wanted to be a little careful that we were not treading in the wrong direction. Just to give you one example, that's the rug that would go in the cabinet meeting room. To give you a feel for the size, that's a tennis court. And to think of rugs in reference to furniture. What would come in the center? What is the size of border? How many colors would you need to get the correct level of detailing and yet have a certain speed in production? So there was a huge amount of back and forth and a lot of work that went from our end. Then comes the soft furnishing. I must say that's where the industry has evolved well. We used only Indian brands, people who manufacture in India. But we had a fantastic time because we could pick very beautiful soft furnishing. But the tougher part was to establish the quality in which it's upholstered. So defining the tufting methods, the tacks and studs at what distance, what color, or cording and what thickness of cording, how the cording turns, where cording will be there, not be there, how tassels are done, tassels for the curtain. And this was the challenging package, defining curtains, mostly undermined in interiors, but defining the quality of motor, remote control, the space to be left, the weights that are put under the curtain, how they will be covered, and frankly speaking, they were surprised that most contractors were surprised that we knew so much about curtains, because we also told them which side we want them to operate it from. When it came to art, that was an area where we just had to establish the intent. The art for the packages which are complete have been executed by Ministry of Culture. But our intent had to be clear so that when they put a curator on board, the curator has some sense of direction or reference of how and what he or she is meant to do, which includes not just the subject matter, but first it comes to the scale. Where would it be? Of what scale? What kind of framing will it have? What type of mounting? To hold itself in the space against the backdrop that we had designed. The idea was to also bring in a lot of craft of India from many different states. We literally have a list of all the states, crafts from everywhere, made sure that each package covered everything from east, west, north, south, center. Mirror was a big package. Mirrors, mirror frames, ornate mirror frames. How the artwork would be framed, styled, composed. Incorporating textiles, embroidery, block printing. And then little things like tea coaster, aroma diffusers, waste paper bins, hand towels, artifacts. There were drawings to indicate. Counting was done in BOQ. That this package will have these many wall clocks, these many dustbins, foot mats. And often we were questioned, कि ये पैकेज में 3000 crores के पैकेज में आप लोग 90 lakhs की foot mats है? So I said, count it. That is what you require. So, it just shows that these things are not accounted for. And if you don't account for it, it never gets done. And if it gets done, then you will see those ugly foot mats with purple color, patterns, ugliness as you enter. And you wonder, कि ये क्यों नहीं सोचा डिजाइनर ने? This was a lamp designed for Parliament House. The truncated triangle was taken as an inspiration for the shade. But the bigger effort was not to use fabric, to do a robust quality shade which is in acrylic and brass lipping. And the base is in solid stone. The forms were inspired from history, so there were, for other packages, we looked at urns and vases from the old times and see if we can repurpose it for a lamp. We also designed pattern for crockery, inspired from sugarcane, with the Parliament logo on it. Just an image to justify styling, hoping some of our schools will pick it up as a subject to be taught. A project with styling without styling. So we've looked at all the 5 elements. Sorry, it's a bit long. I tried to make it shorter, but that was very difficult. I felt somehow I would have to leave out major parts if I had made it shorter. So we designed basically from coat hangers to footrest. And starting from those level of details, We went all the way to even defining the floral arrangements and how a package would have it, where it would be, so that even the flowers and the colors were mentioned. So it was to the last detail that these packages were put together. And while we did this, that concept, that color story, we made it a point that it went through each of these 5 elements at different scales, in different materials, inlays, resin inlay, carving, carpets, etc. It kind of flowed through the project so that one package felt cohesive and complete. We looked at clusters of furniture and backdrops. So between the two, we also had to do this, that if we saw a combination of things, how would it look against what backdrop? How would it fit with other furniture pieces around it? And if we had a material palette, how the color story spread through different materials, and how would it finally fan out when it complete a space? So designing was just the beginning. But what did it take to turn this vision into reality? It was the largest tendered interior project in India. So I'm going to the third part of the presentation, which is communication. For a project of this scale, one had to think of how information from studios to tender, to a contractor, and finally how it would be executed. And what is it that we needed to do? The execution system involved multiple people. Like I said earlier, there were many people who worked on it. And there were many people who would attend workshop visits, site visits together. And you had to play your role in the area that you were contributing. And it made it even more difficult because we worked through COVID. We were given no leeway for lockdown. We had traveled even through the COVID periods. We had multiple number of Zoom calls, which have happened. The office had disintegrated. We just started work and the lockdown came and everybody moved home. And we were working on the parliament package. And we all continued working. And these were people who didn't know each other, didn't know how to work, and still we had to find a way to work in that situation. There were so many people involved, the clients, the consultants, the stakeholders, contractors, vendors, and how do you keep everybody informed of where and how and what you wanted to do? So the challenge we took and were able to go through is we raised the benchmarks of tendered interior projects in India. The tenders are all public tenders. They are on online portals, accessible to anybody. And we are hoping that even CPWD will now demand much higher quality of interior tenders. I'll explain a few strategies to you of what makes it so special. So like I said, furniture was the biggest package. When you look at a furniture layout, the first thing is coding it. But the second is to understand the variation of furniture that would go in the space. But the variation we all are aware of. But in terms of execution, it's executed differently. So there will be stuff that is bespoke, there is stuff that will be done on site, there will be stuff which is modified versions from the company produced products, and then there would be yellow, which is the bought out. The packages carried this color coding. Because you have to remember that interior package was complete along with the architecture package. When architecture package was uploaded, interior package was uploaded with it. So say for example, if Tata got the parliament work, they got the architecture, the interiors, and everything together. Then they would look for an interior contractor to carry forward, and that would not be one guy. Based on the categories, it would give them a possibility to divide work. But we were already thinking this through beforehand for them to ensure that we would get what we wanted, not only from the quality point of view, but the speed at which these projects have been executed. Typically, furniture is only specified as Excel sheets, with just a little tiny picture where you hardly see what it is, and then a whole paragraph describing the size and dimension. That is not what furniture is all about. So what we established is something called data sheets. So these are A4 size data sheets, 2 or 3 sheets per furniture piece. We previously looked at 1200 numbers. So 1200 multiplied by 4 or 5 are the number of data sheets that were produced to define furniture. It was defined to the level of even what kind of glider would be under the furniture piece. The other thing that we established in the tender is mock-up strategy. In interiors, mock-ups is a big deal. Now, when a contractor becomes bigger, they don't understand what mock-ups mean in interiors. So mock-ups could be partial, it could be a corner of a space, it could be furniture itself, it could be a small sampling, or it could even be a virtual one. So we established a method that how mock-ups would run, how shop drawings would be provided by the vendor, how we would check, and how each time the prototype is checked. And this really eased the communication between us and the contractors. And these data sheets were not just made for furniture. They were also made for frames, for curtains, for carpets, for materials. How do you pick up veneer sheets? How do you select which is a good marble from a bad marble? Because with each package the contractor changed. The aggregator that the contractor will get will also be different. So we had sheets, generic data sheets, which would guide them of what was expected by HCP. And then beyond documents, what we had is what is called official kickoff meetings, where everything was put together, various contractors would come. We would insist, in fact, because sometimes only the woodworker will come, the upholsterer won't come, the brass guy won't come. We'll make sure that the whole bunch of people were there and the package was explained to them thoroughly. So between the kickoff meetings and site handovers, what all happened? Tons and tons of reports and RFIs. Our team became expert at putting reports and RFIs together. We also became bullies. We would go check furniture, literally use a cutter to slice it, to check whether the layering was done correctly or not. Lot of small samples which got couriered between the vendor and us. Unending number of site visits to workshops, site, etc. We also had some very friendly vendors who literally created a booklet to teach how good upholstery can be done. Again, a subject never taught. Upholstery is a big thing that we need to teach. we're almost coming to the end. I've shown you the effort behind interiors for Central Vista project. I'll show you few pictures of how it turned out. I would like to acknowledge all the people who worked on this project. So the first special thanks goes to Government of India. There was essentially MOHUA, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, and then there is CPWD and the various personnels that we worked hand in hand with them. Often it was very friendly, sometimes there were arguments, but with each other's support is how we managed to run the project. HCP, our main consultant. More than 280 people. Various specialists and consultants who contributed on the project. And my own team. We were not very large. People came, people went. But on average, we were 15, 16 people. We were the three key people. That's Sonal Ben, who was in charge of the styling experts, and Bhagyashree, who's here in the audience. She's sadly not with us anymore. She's back here, back in Pune. She's an alumni of Bnca, and I'm very proud to make this presentation here today. She kind of held the fort together, is how I would put it. Her contribution was very big in accomplishing this. And so it's not just me, it's an incredible team that only allows one to do this kind of work. It's the effort, it's the process, it's the magnitude of the work that it demanded us to put together. And having done this project, this is how I feel. The time for interior designers and architects to come together and redefine how interiors are perceived, communicated, and executed in India. I think we need to do something about it. India has always been a land of extraordinary design. Our temples, monuments, palaces, textiles, crafts stand as a proof. While we may not hold that position today, this project has reinforced a belief in me that we have everything it takes to get there again. Our rich past, thriving present, and an ambitious future is against us. All it takes is an extra step. As designers, we have the power to shape what comes next. So let's take that step for our projects, our practice, our society, and our nation. The future of Indian design is ours to create. So one of the other thing that we managed is while we did this project, we also took upon doing this book in the studio. So this book took about 4 years. It was launched last year in September. It's already gone for reprint. And it's a book which talks about our design philosophy, explained through 5 design principles, using only 5 projects. The idea is it's not a coffee table book. It's a kind of book that can teach us how to think of Indian concepts and how can we connect interior design to us Indians rather than learning from looking at the Western world or Pinterest images. Thank you very much.
Before thanking ma'am formally, I would ask our audience. I too felt very wow. Ma'am's element and their expressions were amazing. It was just like relearning interior design. And it's like unlearning and relearning interior design. I would say that book, definitely I will read. I never read books, but not in school also. but I'll definitely read that book. For me, that would be book would be COI, that is not Constitution of India, but Constitution of Interior Design. Uh, on behalf of Triple ID PRC, can we applaud for this entire presentation? Not like that. That's too formal. Let's say WOW all together on the count of 1, 2, 3. Thank you. One more time, please. Sound backside से नहीं आ रहा है, कुछ mic problem है वहाँ पे? 1, 2, 3. Thank you so much. So, formally, on behalf of Triple ID PRC and our audience, I would like to thank you, Architect Kana Patel, for gracing us with her presence and sharing invaluable knowledge. We are truly enriched by your words and your work, ma'am. It made us rework on our concepts of interior design, integrating bespoke designs and using Indian culture once again. And my heartfelt thanks to all students and teachers for your curiosity, and to the Triple ID PRC committee for organizing this inspiring event. Together, we continue to shape the future of interior design. Let this day remind us that design is not just about aesthetic, it's about shaping experiences, solving challenges, and living legacy. Thank you all for being here, and have a great time ahead. Thank you.